Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about a recent release from the Criterion Collection. This is The Tales of Hoffman, directed and written, produced by Michael Powell and Pressburger. It is a lavish Technicolor experience. I thought it was one of the most overwhelming movie experiences I've had in a long, long time. It is just an absolutely gorgeous restoration. It has been out on the Criterion Collection and in DVD, but there is no comparison between the DVD and this movie, I don't believe, as far as the colors that just are simply amazing. And there's no coincidence that the first credit in the opening credits says filmed in Technicolor in big letters before anything else comes up. And it's really, I think you could see it as part of Powell and Pressburger, the Archers Technicolor trilogy that includes The Red Shoes from 1948 and Black Narcissus the year before in 1947. This is just, it may be the culmination of Powell and Pressburger, the culmination of the absolute glories of what this three-strip Technicolor process could produce on the screen. It only had a few more years left, I think in around 54, 55 other processes. Technicolor was a very unwieldy machinery technical challenge to film in Technicolor, and the newer processes had color that seemed more realistic, more naturalistic. But for the Red Shoes, Technicolor is absolutely perfect. And Hoffman and Powell had said later in life that he thought that Tales of Hoffman was his best film. It certainly was not his most commercially successful film by far. But I can see what he means, because he was able to put so much of what he learned in film into Tales of Hoffman, which is based on an opera by Jacques Offenbach from about 1880. Hoffman himself, E.T.A. Hoffman, was actually composed operas. I didn't know that, but he's more known today. Hoffman is as a story writer. I think he wrote some novels too. Tales of Hoffman is a three-part, three different stories from his collection of stories, Hoffman's collection of stories, and then bookended with a prologue and epilogue, with Hoffman being a character in all the prologue in all three stories, which he isn't in the short stories, but in Offenbach's opera he is. And Hoffman is part of the German Romanticism movement. He lived 1776 to 1822. Romanticism with a capital R. Think of Goethe's The Sorrows of Young Werther, and you have an idea of the kind of romantic pessimism that Hoffman was famous for in his own life. These stories, he had a life of romantic despair, romantic pessimism. Nothing seemed to work out for him in that department. And Offenbach wrote the opera in 1880. He died before it actually was performed. He was known for sort of comic operas, and this is a very dark, this is his dark opera, The Tales of Hoffman, but it was a big hit. And and a perfect subject for Michael Powell, who especially like in the Red Shoes, is the life of an artist, and to die for your art, and to see it in this kind of big, outsized, romantic kind of ambition. And Powell draws very much on his silent film days. I didn't realize how far back Michael Powell went, but he worked in silent films, especially with Rex Ingram, who had a studio in Nice in France, and this Tales of Hoffman has so much of silent film in it. because he was able to film it as if he was filming a silent film. All the music was pre-recorded. So in the filming of the movie, all the actors in the singing roles were lip syncing to pre-recorded music. So they didn't have to worry about sound, the noisy Technicolor cameras, and they could just talk to each other, you know, because nothing was being recorded on the set. And so he draws on his silent film. There's so much. I mean, the way Powell always cuts to kind of very dramatic close-ups, you know, where people are looking very, very silent film-ish. And also Disney often said Disney, and certainly Fantasia would be a prime inspiration for some of the elements of Tales of Hoffman. So the other thing that pre-recording allowed was that because there's a lot of ballet in this, a lot of dance, a lot of movement, he could use the great stars of ballet and the star of the Red Shoes, in particular, Moira Shearer, Robert Halpern also in the Red Shoes, who could dance, were preeminent ballet dancers of their time, but he needed singers, so he could use the greatest singers around on the pre-recording that they would lip sync to. So, but the Hoffman, who, as I said, is in each of these segments, is played by Robert Rounceville, and he sings his own his part because he was an opera, and he was an opera star, and he didn't have to dance. And the only other in the third story, Anne Ayres plays Antonio, his love interest, and she was also an opera star, and they had actually appeared in Tales of Hoffman on stage. But everybody else is dubbed, and again, a pre-recorded score that they lip sync to. The set designs, I don't know, Hein Hycroft was the name of the set designer, and he was just, I don't know where he came up with these ideas. There's so, like I said, expressionism, surrealism, different art that was that was popular at the time, in vogue. He draws on so many different elements in his designs, and Christopher Shallis did the Technicolor cinematography. Freddie Francis was the camera operator, who later became famous as a cinematographer himself and worked with Michael Powell subsequently. You have to mention Sir Thomas Beecham. Again, Powell was working with the great talents of 1951, because Sir Thomas Beecham, the conductor of the Royal Philharmonic, he had also worked on the Red Shoes. I believe he orchestrated the Moira Shearer ballet in the Red Shoes. And he kept prodding Powell to make a full-scale opera and make it cinematic, you know, and Powell finally, and Beecham was very closely associated with Tales of Hoffman. It was one of his favorite operas to direct on stage. And in the opening ballet in Tales of Hoffman with Moira Shearer, the Dragonfly Ballet, is not in the opera. And Beecham took different elements, different parts of Offenbach's music to score this really beautiful opening ballet that Moira Shearer, and she's just spectacular here. She didn't like her performance and her dancing in the Red Shoes much, and she always said later on that this was she really danced spectacularly well, and I think she certainly does in this Dragonfly Ballet. And then she is in the opening, the first of the three stories, as a puppet, and just, I mean, she's just amazing in her ballet, and where she brings, like, you know, a puppet-like gestures to her dancing. So the first segment of the film is set in Paris, And then the second segment, and this is the one with Morris Scherer, and then the second segment set in Venice with Lumilia Chirina, who was also in the Red Shoes. She was the ballet dancer who Morris Scherer replaces in the Red Shoes. And she has such a presence. Morris Scherer had a lot of movies, straight movies, and she would go on to perform on stage in non-ballet roles. But Chirina, you don't get to see her too often, and she has just an amazing presence. And this Venice sequence includes the Barcarolle, that is probably the most famous music that Offenbach ever wrote, and it's just beautiful, haunting melody. And and I forgot to say that the libretto of Tales of Hoffman is not the original French. They translated it into English, hoping that because they didn't just want to appeal to opera buffs, they wanted a more general audience who they expected would be able to follow. So the Barcarolle in this segment is Moon of Love. I often wondered what because I've listened to this many times, and there's on YouTube you can find many different versions. It's all beautiful, but I often wondered what the lyrics, the translation of what they were actually singing. And then in the third section, we're on a Greek island, and everything is so Baroque in the first two segments, and then the opening of the third segment, the opening few minutes of this third story, set on this Greek island of a young woman who is dying of consumption, and she's not allowed to sing. And again, we have the conjunction between art and death. Everything is, in the beginning segments, we're sort of like seeing a stage, as if we were actually at an opera theater seeing a stage. But it includes what many Offenbach fans think is the best music that Offenbach ever wrote in this third segment. And this opening segment, about half of the final story, was cut. Korda thought it was too boring, but I've seen it now. I've seen the film 3 times now in this version, once with the commentary, and I've become, and I thought that was my original reaction as well. But I don't know. I think it's a brilliant segment, and the ending is just overpowering. I find the whole movie overpowering in so many different ways, and I have to mention Robert Halprin, who is in the Red Shoes as well. He plays the villain in each of these segments, and as well as the prologue and epilogue, and he's just magnificent. And he was a great ballet dancer, but he loved acting. He was in a whole lot of playing dramatic roles in a whole lot of movies, and very recognizable. And he lends this macabre element to it, the silent film, gothic quality to the film. He's playing Dracula. And on the extras, we get a long conversation with George Romero. And then when I saw his name attached to it, I said, why would he be talking about this film? But he explains that as an 11-year-old, and you have to apologize. It's like almost 100 degrees here, and I had to turn the air conditioning off. We're in the midst of, I think, about 3 weeks of 95 average high temperatures, and a couple times in the hundreds. Romero, as an 11-year-old, was taken by his aunt and uncle to see the filming of the Tales of Hoffman, and he just fell in love with the movie. And you could see some of the why it was. He explains why it was that he felt that this was a major influence. I think he even says it's his favorite film of all time, and it certainly was Martin Scorsese, one of his favorite films of all time. He does the commentary interspersed with Bruce Eder. This is all old archival commentaries, but Eder does do a update in various points, pointing out what was cut from the original showings of Tales of Hoffman, by Alexander Korda at the request of Alexander Korda, who produced this, who produced Tales of Hoffman. So it's just so much talent. I mean, it's just incredible how a movie, how a movie could have so much talent, and it really pays off. And they all say about how Powell and Pressburger were so open to everybody's contribution. The great films always have great contributors that we talk about Powell, Pressburger, but there was so much behind the cameras, the cast, the singers behind the scenes. I mean, this singing, you know, I'm not an opera buff, you know, I saw the Tales of Hoffman at a film society on a big screen. It was a knockout. And I never wanted to see it again because I knew because of the Technicolor VHS or DVD, they were not going to reproduce it. But I knew that this was probably going to be the way to see it today. So we get, as I say, Scorsese does a commentary. It's very scene specific, where he talks about how the different technical tricks and how he inspired, so many of them inspired him in different films that he made in his career. He calls it a composed film. And it really is, because Powell just takes it, the flights of imagination, where opera is taken with all the different arts combined together. Not done very often, and for a major filmmaker, Otto Preminger's Carmen Jones wasn't nearly as flamboyant as this, but he did pre-record all the songs, because I think only one role in Carmen Jones was not dubbed by a singer. The Magic Flute, Ingmar Bergman's version of the Magic Flute, I watched about the first 15 minutes of it. I had never seen it before, and very conventional. You know, we seem to be in an audience, so he cuts to a lot of close-ups. At least that's the first 15 minutes. It might get more extravagant as it goes on, but the Tales of Hoffman didn't get the same kind of recognition when it was released the way the Red Shoes did. Red Shoes in New York City played for 2 years at a single film theater. It was such a popular movie for the lover of the arts, but it had crossover material. So the question for most people, I would imagine, is too much artifice? There's just so much to look at. I don't think so. I could look at every frame of this film over and over and over and over again. It's just an amazing, amazing film. So again, a Technicolor trilogy. If you want to know what Technicolor can do, you know, watch. I don't have Black Narcissus. It is playing on the Criterion channel. I watched it a couple months ago. It looks fantastic. The Red Shoes is available in UHD and the Criterion. The UHD, unbelievable. Tales of Hoffman, not in UHD, but the Blu-ray is just. This is a monumental work. I was just. My memory of it was fantastic. The experience was, I can still remember going into the theater and sitting down and at the end of the film. And I think, I'm not sure whether we got the full, the full version of the final shot, or the final sequence, final story of the movie. But I know we did not get it, because Thelma Shoemaker, Powell, famous film editor, and was married to Michael Powell in the last years of his life. She restored the finale. Is great because we get to see Sir Thomas Beecham, you know, set down his conducting wand, and you know, with the great pose, he does this great pose, and the end, and then Powell filmed this. Finale or post the end, where he would bring out the actor and then he would bring out the singer, so they would be side and they would bow to each other. The singers and these are famous. You know, I'm not an opera history buff, but evidently these are some of the greatest singers in Europe at the time who sang the roles. And so we get to see all of them, and I really appreciate that. I'm really, because Powell cut that. He had originally envisioned to have it, but then he cut it, and then Thelma Shoemaker Powell, she restored it. So overall, just highly recommend. Don't worry if you're not an opera fan. This is a cinematic marvel. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who listened. I do appreciate it. Comments are always welcome. Take care.